Please thank the band. That was amazing. You know, some of them have been doing this all day, and so we appreciate y'all so much. And they worked so hard to create that kind of an environment for us here, and I appreciate the sacrifices they make to bring that kind of music, and I'm grateful for all of them and for Dustin, who always does such a great job planning and preparing and getting the band ready. And you know, some folks roll in here after having a late night at the Auburn game, so that also can be trying for the band to make that happen and be passionate. Appreciate them, appreciate all of you who serve and give and also make sacrifices to keep this church moving in the direction that God has called us to. Thank you for what you do, and I don't ever want to miss an opportunity to be grateful, because I genuinely feel like we're doing this together. You know, I really feel like that our value of team is actually happening here, and I love that, and I appreciate it so much. How about this morning? If you were here this morning, we ended up baptizing 13 people. Like, that was awesome. It was a great time this morning of just worshiping together through baptism and changed lives and all of that. And I'm really actually pretty tired tonight from just the day already and have a little bit of voice left. But that was so wonderful. I wanted to also give you a quick update from school stuff. All that we did last week. We ended up with 15 bags for nurses, 47 for custodians, 13 for maintenance folks, 119 for bus drivers. So we, with all the extra stuff that was brought that didn't make it in a bag, we were well over 200, which the goal was 200. So we totally blew that one out of the water. You know that we had 40 pounds of pretzels brought. You know how light pretzels are? That's a lot of pretzels. Some folks really like the pretzels, so that was amazing. And so pretzels will be eaten and have been distributed, and we're loving that. And so, again, thank you for your generosity. And this church never disappoints when it comes to putting out the call to do things, and I love that. And I love that we have a generous spirit here, and I'm grateful for you. So we are in the process of a very long conversation. As Dustin said, we've started this a few years back, and we're looking at a goal of January 2020 when we will stand up and talk about all of these prayers and all that God has spoken to us about, and He will have unveiled to us the vision in the next chapter of our church, and I'm excited about that. But this is the process that we go through. We gather like this. We worship together. We pray together, as we'll do at the end of this time, and we talk about important things, kingdom things, what God is up to in this church and in this community and around the world, and how we can be a part of that. And, you know, I just keep thinking, like, the burden of me as the pastor is, how will we continue to reach a world that is just lost and broken? How will we continue as time goes on to reach a culture that is quickly drifting away from church? How will we hand this church to another generation in such a way that they can continue to do big things in this world? And those are the kind of things that pastors think about, or at least this pastor thinks about, is I'm never content, I guess, where we are. I'm always wondering, where are we going? You know, like, what's over that next hill? What's that next thing that we can be looking at? And I think about a quote from a pastor named Andy Stanley. He's pastor of North Point Community Church up in Atlanta. And he gave this definition of a vision. He said, it's a mental picture of what could be, fueled by conviction of what should be. So it's a mental picture of what could be. These are the things that could be out there, fueled by conviction of what should be. This should happen. Like, there are just some things that should happen, right? And then there are these two questions that are kind of posed on the other side of that definition of a vision. What problem are you solving as a church? And then what solution are you offering? So for us all the time, and for me for the last 18 years of doing this church, it's been, you know, what problems are we solving in our own community and around the world? What's the next problem that we haven't even encountered yet, and how are we going to solve it when we get there? What is the solution that we're offering to a lost and broken world? What do they look at the church and go, there's the solution? You know, we want to be that. We want the world to look at the church and go, there's the solution. I see it now. And we want to be offering that every single week of every year, right? Because there are other people who haven't experienced passionate worship and changed life and all that kind of stuff yet. And we want to reach them. And I think about 18 and 18 plus years ago now, the idea and the vision for this church and where we are right here today, man, it was fragile. First, it lived in my mind as a very confusing gray something that was out there, 18 years ago, not a lot of churches were doing what we're doing. Now everybody's doing that today, but back then that was so different. And there were a lot of people when we first started out, they thought we were handling snakes and doing all kind of stuff, and it was like, man, the rumors that got around. Drums in church? Are you teasing me? It's just like, oh my gosh. But early on, I just remember the vision for what we're doing now was just an idea, and it was just so thin, and it's just for me and for the few leaders we had in that day, if you'd have looked away from the vision for just a minute, it would have just disappeared. But we had it. We held on to it. And like a seed, we planted that thing in the soil of God's grace, and we asked Him to grow it. And He told us to do hard things, and we said, okay, we'll do it, whatever it takes to grow this seed into a beautiful tree, of vision and the church and changing this world. We'll do that. And so for 18 years, we've been nurturing that growth, right? Watching it happen right before our very eyes. And so many great things have happened along the way, and many sacrifices have been made by other people for 18 years to get us to this point. And many of you who've been tracking with us for years, we've all made decisions and choices to help get this church where it needs to go. And I think about one of the major fruits of all of that effort. Every time I talk to Josh Agerton and he fills me in on what's happening at Embrace Church, I think, man, that is one major fruit of the vision that God gave us, was to multiply this thing. And I love that we were able to reproduce and bring about a whole nother church. And think about that day back in the gym so long ago when we first gathered all these families who said, you know what, we'll go. 175 families, and Josh Agerton went over to a gym and said, we're going to try something new. And as you know, eventually we let them become their own church, and they've been doing that. And they now are at a point, they've purchased 7 acres up on College right there as you pass the fisheries. That's on the left. In that new neighborhood right there on the right, they have a piece of ground right there. That's where they're going to build. As we speak, they're in the middle of their own financial campaign to build a building. They have spent some time here looking at our building and getting measurements, and Josh and I have been talking through that. In fact, this Thursday night, they'll be in this worship space having their own big vision night and unveiling the drawings for their new building. And so it's going to be an awesome night for them, and they really wanted to be here to do that. And Josh called me, I guess it's been over a year ago now, one day, and he said, would you mind if I came out and got some acorns from the white oaks on your property? And I was like, no, Josh, you can't do that. And I was like, yes, you're welcome to do that. And so he came and got some of those, and he planted them in pots. And he got Gary Keever, who is the tree guy in town who goes to this church, to help him grow these little acorns into oak trees. And so now they've got these saplings that are growing. They're bigger than that now. And what they're going to do is they're going to plant those on their property when they build their building, because they very much love the fact that they are a planting of Cornerstone Church. And that is going to help fuel their own vision to reproduce one day. I love that. I mean, that's awesome. And I value that so much, because that dream was just a fragile dream so long ago. We thought, man, one day, not only are we going to plant this church, but we're going to plant other churches along the way. And God honored that prayer and that vision, that desire. And I guess my question continues to be, how are we going to keep making these kingdom movements? How are we going to multiply this thing that God is doing among us and that is so good in changing lives? And I also remember back, and some of you were here when we did this in 2005, when we first got into this building. We had just had the foundation and the walls, and we asked the contractor if we could come in and do some writing, and they said yeah. And so we brought markers and Sharpies, and we came in here, and there was a whole bunch of us scattered all over this building, and we just started writing scriptures and prayers for the future of this church. We were writing our own visions and dreams and hopes, and right now they are underneath the glue on the carpet, all underneath here and all out in the welcome area and all over the walls. And as I remember after we did that, I went around and just spent some time kind of by myself reading them, and I just about broke down in tears, man. I was like, these people have a bigger vision than I do. Like, this thing, this is serious business here. Like, we're not kidding. We want to see lives changed. And I remember reading some, that were written by people who I had baptized, who I know their life had been dramatically changed. and now they're writing and dreaming and praying that God would change somebody else's life. So like, this is who we are as a church. This is what we're about here, is not just us, but about those we have yet to reach, and about a generation that is before us, and a generation that's coming after us, and how can we reach them. And for 18 years, one of my biggest fears, honestly, has been that we would do something that sometimes churches do, and that we would get comfortable, that we would settle, that we would like slide into some comfortable rhythm, where we're just kind of doing our thing, and we're just happy about us, as long as everything here is good for us, we're good, and we would forget about everybody else. Like, that's one of my biggest fears, is that my church would forget. Thankfully, we have not. But I don't want us to ever forget that there are lost and broken 100 yards from this church, half a mile, 5 miles. They're all out there. They're right there. They're among you and me every day. And they need to be reached. And someday, I'm talking about long into the future when I'm not your pastor and maybe you aren't even here, we're not here. There's going to be a whole other group of people who are going to be at Cornerstone Church. Many of them's lives will have been changed for eternity. Marriages will have been saved, and children will have been raised in the faith, and many people have been baptized and all this kind of stuff. And they're going to look back to those people back in 2018. They're going to say, I'm so grateful that there was a group of people who had vision and who made sacrifices and who were willing to take next steps in their faith so that we could experience what we have today in this church. That's going to happen one day because of decisions that we make right now, because of being obedient to the Lord calling us to take a next step. And I think about this statement that in order to reach people no one else is reaching, you have to do things no one else is doing. What are the things that no one else is doing that we can do at Cornerstone? That's a question that we're asking right now among our leadership. What are things that we can do that no one else is willing to do to reach people that won't be reached any other way? And I'd like to ask another question on the other side of that. It's kind of a harder question, but it's something like this. How much discomfort are we willing to experience to see God's will done for our church? You know what I'm saying? Like, how much pain are we willing to experience, whether that's change or sacrifice or whatever that is, to see God's will done for our church and to reach people no one else can reach? Because you know what? It's not easy to pull out of this gravitational pull that's back to comfort and to us. It takes a lot to push out of that. And I can assure you that less will not reach the next generation. Doing less will not reach the next generation. Amen? It's going to take more to reach a group that we're slowly losing out of the church. We have a culture that, again, it is not built around church anymore. And generations of children are going to be raised who will not know that the church is important and what it has to offer. And it's going to take more to reach them, I guarantee you. More investment of our time and resources in serving, more passion about what we do, more faith development among us, more groups. Good is only good. It's not great. And the enemy of great is what? Good. When we just say, it's good, it's okay, that's when we stop striving and we stop reaching to do what needs to be done to move from good to great. And I know, there's some who might say, well, gosh, how much more do we have to do? Why is it always about more? And I would say because the numbers and the statistics are still staggering of people who are lost and broken right here in this community. And people who are not connected to a passionate faith family who will love them and care for them. And I guess, it's like, it's not the question of, am I passionate about this? Because I am the most passionate in this church about this. There's no doubt about it. And I need to be. I should be, right? As your leader. So it's not a question of, do I want this? It's a question of, do you want this? Because really, I'm not doing this alone. It's, do we want to do this? Do we see the need out there? Are we going to join together, right? Because it's not up to one individual here. It's up to us collectively to devise ways to reach people who are far from God. Now, there's a book, in light of all of this that I'm talking about, that I've been rereading over the last month. And it's just, I think that God just dropped it right back in my lap. It's a book, it's an older book, and I brought it back up. They revised it, did a new edition. It's called The 5 Practices of Fruitful Congregations. Basically, the authors went out and they researched lots of churches, and they discovered that there are 5 common things among all the healthy and successful churches out there. Things that churches are doing that are helping them grow and be healthy as a church, reaching their community, doing great things. And those 5 practices are this: radical hospitality, inspiring worship, intentional faith development, risk-taking mission and service, and extravagant generosity. And as I've just been letting that roll over me over the last month, I'm thinking, man, that's pretty big. And I thought, if you took the first words off of all of those practices, it would be just this. It would be just hospitality, worship, faith development, mission and service, generosity. Well, that sounds like what most churches aspire to do. Those are just kind of the things you do. But when you put those first words back on that list, words like radical and inspiring and intentional and risk-taking and extravagant, well, that changes it, doesn't it? That's like a next level of each one of those things. And basically, the description of each of those is this: radical hospitality. That is like active, over-the-top desire to invite and welcome and receive and care for those who are strangers, who are looking for a spiritual home. It's not a program. It's not some evangelism strategy. It is every individual in this church who says, you know what, I'm going to take that on myself. Because when we do that, it becomes a culture of radical hospitality. When we choose to do that, not only within this church, but when you're out at Publix, or you're at the mall, or you're at the restaurant, or wherever you are making it a personal mission to be radically hospitable to whoever you're with. Inspiring worship. Now, I feel like we do this pretty good. I mean, I'll just go ahead and say that. I feel like what we do is inspiring. But we don't ever want to stop at that. We want to make sure that what we do collectively, not just the music, the message, the greeting, what happens in the parking lot, what happens with our kids, what happens with our youth and colleges, all of that. Do people leave an experience going, golly, I am inspired to change my life, to reach somebody else for Christ. I am inspired to take a next step in my faith, or to be baptized, or give my heart to Jesus. Am I inspired by that? Like, I want to hold that up high. Intentional faith development. That is like an intentional effort to create experiences where we are growing in our faith. It's really a decision that we all make individually to say, you know what, I choose to grow in my faith, to be in a group, to be alongside 1 or 2 other people where iron is sharpening iron. And I am growing in my own faith because I know how this works. That when you raise your own spiritual temperature by doing these kinds of things, then collectively in this church, the spiritual temperature goes up, and then all sorts of good things start happening. All sorts of vision starts taking place. Risk-taking mission and service. This is like over-the-top effort to reach people, to make positive differences in people's lives in this community and around the world. It is like going out of the ordinary to serve people in an extreme way. What does that look like for us here? And then extravagant generosity. Again, it's just a culture of sharing and giving that exceeds all expectations, where we use words like lavish to talk about how we treat other people and how we reach out to them. So those are 5 things. And you know what? It's interesting. Those are 5 qualities of the early church. When you go back to Acts, they exhibited these 5 qualities. These are timeless qualities of the church. And so I believe that, first of all, in this whole visioning process for this next year and a half, or however long we have until January 2020, our first step is to measure where we are against these 5 practices. I've already challenged our leadership that we're going to do that. We're going to be taking a look at these things around our church and saying, how are we doing with this? Not in a way to say, oh, we're not doing anything, but in a way to say, is there anything we can do better? Is there something that needs to go to the next level here? Because I know that if we do that over this next year and a half, this vision is going to get real clear as God begins to well this up in us. And again, that to me, intentional faith development is a key part of this whole thing. I know that some of you, maybe you came tonight and you were like, all right, Rusty, what's the vision? Come on, baby. Let's bring this thing. Here you go. I don't know yet. Are you inspired? Come on. This is why we're in a process. We want this to take time. We don't want to just rush this and say, God, just show us the thing. Give us the whatever. That's what we do in our generation. Can I just hit 10 seconds on the microwave and get a vision, God? You know? And you know what? God could do that. But it won't be nearly as good as us waiting and praying and worshiping and doing what we're doing right here. So here's the thing, though. I still have questions that I think need to be addressed before we get to January 2020, okay? So I just made a list, and I ran these by executive team. But don't hold me to a lot of this stuff. These are just questions that, just keep burning in my mind. So, I've got questions like, how will we engage more of our community with the love and grace of Jesus Christ? What are we going to do with the rest of our 20 acres? We've built on 6. We have 14. I don't know. Come up with an idea. Anyway, how will we reach the next generation that I've said is not being raised in a culture that values going to church, biblical authority, traditional values, all those kinds of things? I think about this passage. It's haunting in Judges 2:10. After Joshua died, there's this moment. It says, after that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. A whole generation that was lost. And I'm like, that cannot happen in this day and age. And yet, again, there's a generation that is slowly or quickly moving away from what the church is all about. But then if you go over to 2 Samuel 14:14, there's this other great verse that's more hopeful, and it's something that you actually don't find much in the Old Testament in this way. It says there that God devises ways so that a banished person does not remain banished from him. In other words, God is devising ways to reach those who are far from him. He was doing that then, and he's doing that right now. And you know how he does it now? Through us. He does it through us. He wants to devise ways to reach people who are far from him because he loves them. And he needs the church to get together and get just as passionate as he is about it and love people the way he does. God devises ways to reach people. All right. What about Auburn University? That's a big old ecosystem happening right there, isn't it? Sometimes I feel like that's an island unto itself in some ways, and we're just, they're just wrecking 9 months out of the year. I can't go downtown. I can't drive around. Now they're all back again. I can't get into a restaurant. So many thoughts that you could have about Auburn University, but we don't want that. I want better questions than that. Because there are plenty of gaps at Auburn University. And there are plenty of darkness over there. And there's plenty of things that need to be changed and ways that a church could reach in and help. And I learned that there are lots of students at Auburn University who have a hard time feeding themselves because they don't have enough resources. And there's a food pantry over there, and they're saying, you know what, we need help. Well, what could Cornerstone Church do about that? What about all the international students, not only that are here, that are going to come, as President Leith has said? He is planning to reach many, many. I think 10,000 is what he plans to increase student body by, reaching international students. Well, you know what? That is the world coming to Auburn, Alabama. And as far as I'm concerned, all churches need to be prepared for that. Many are going to come who don't know the Lord, who have no connection to a church home. How can we impact them so that one day when they go back to their home, they take Jesus with them? What is that going to look like? What about church multiplication? How are we going to keep doing that? What about developing partnerships with other like-minded churches? Heaven forbid. And sitting down and devising ways to reach people. What about a next level of investment overseas? It's great that we have a medical clinic in Uganda. I love that. What about a hospital? I don't know. Just saying. I love that we have feeding program in Nicaragua. And we have several of those, actually. What if we were to start a whole preschool system in Nicaragua? That's something they desperately need. Could the church do that? I don't know. I'm just asking. See, the way I look at this The future is not about what we can't do. It's about what we can do. And yet it's not even about what we can do. It's about what we should do. Like there's just some things the church should do. The question is, are we going to look at it long enough and say, yes, we're going to do that? So, I don't have a big ask for you tonight, except to continue to pray. And we're going to pray together in just a minute. Because I think that some of the best work we often overlook. And that's just getting on a knee and offering ourselves to God and asking Him to show us the way. And it's one thing for us to do that in our individual lives and so important. It's another thing when we get together as a church and do that. Because I think the Lord is listening to us and is ready to act. He's just waiting on us to come to Him. So I want to pray for a renewed sense of passion, even among our church. A passion for following Jesus, for reaching the lost, for worshiping together well, for extravagant generosity, for risk-taking mission, for intentional faith development, all of these things. I want us to be praying along those lines. How can we do more of that? And allow this process to unfold over these months that are coming. And I tell you, for somebody who's kind of a go person, like let's go, let's do this, it's like swimming through peanut butter. Can we just get the vision now? You know, it's like, guys, no, just hang in there. We're doing this. We're cooking this thing. But I think about Habakkuk 2:2-3, that was in the video this morning. I want to read that again for us. And the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. And I believe that God's going to be right on time for us. Amen? You believe that? I think we're right on time with Him. And we're going to keep praying and keep listening and keep dreaming together of what could be and what should be. So here's a few next steps for us, some things that I want you to consider. You need to sign up for a conversation. Lee will direct us at the end, but there are tables back there that you can sign up for one of those nights. You are welcome to come to all three. It will be the exact same thing at all three, though. So just pick one and come to that. What will happen is we'll spend an hour together. Again, that's the 16th, 23rd, and 30th, 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll spend just an hour. We're going to gather. You're going to sit at a round table. We'll talk about why we're doing this. I'll ask some strategic questions that you will discuss at the table related to a lot of what we just talked about here tonight. Give you a chance to speak into this. There will be executive team leaders at these tables and people who will be writing things down so that we can gather all this information, whatever you're sharing, whatever's on your heart. And we're going to take all of that back and we're going to collectively look at that as a leadership team and kind of see what God is saying among us, right? And how can we add that to the overall conversation? And we'll report back on that at some point. Here's kind of what you said and here's what we're hearing. We're going to have another gathering like we do every year, our celebration dinner in late January, early February, so you'll be looking for that. That'll be another opportunity for us to gather and talk about what God is doing among us. Maybe even talk more specifically about things that God is devising among our people. Something else you can do is pray on the prayer benches. We have prayer benches back on the trail that takes you on the back of the property. You know that question of what are we going to do with this property? We'll go back there and pray and ask God. God, what do you want with this piece of property that we have here? What do you want to see done here? Tyler McGill, Tyler, where are you? Right over here, has literally started the prayer bench small group. So or is it an 8-week group? Is it an 8-week group? Yeah, the 8-week group. You can go see Tyler and get it on his group. He would love to have 500 people following him down the prayer trail so that we can pray together, right? 500 ought to do it? Okay. That is literally a group. You can sign up and be a part of that. Love for you to do that. And then just continue to keep your eyes and your heart open as you just do what you do in this community. As you look around, praying, God, show me and show us as a church. Guide us and lead us. Let us know what you're thinking. That's our prayer all the time. So here's what I want to do right now. Is I just want us to pray. So if you would just bow your head, I'm just going to guide us through some things that we need to pray about tonight. And we'll just give our heart to the Lord for the next few minutes together.